Hello everyone. One important criterion in IELTS assessment for writing and speaking is grammatical range and accuracy. And to show grammatical range, uh, complex sentence plays an important role. So how do we have a complex sentence structure? What do we do in that? How do we include certain things in a sentence so that it becomes complex? That's what we are going to discuss today. So complex sentence has a dependent clause. So that means there's independent clause too. So we have independent and dependent clauses. But to understand what an independent or a dependent clause is, we should also know what a clause is. What is a clause? And let's look at these words. Beautiful is just one word. A beautiful flower is a phrase. It's a group of words that plays a role. We talk about something, we talk about flower, all right, which flower? A beautiful flower. It makes some sense, but not complete sense. The moment we say that is a beautiful flower, it makes some sense, it makes complete sense in a way. It has a verb in it. This is what we call a clause. And this is what a sentence is. So a clause gives us a sentence. It looks beautiful. It has the verb looks in it. So this group of words is a sentence, it's a clause. So one thing we've understood, it's a clause that gives us a sentence. So a sentence can have just one clause, but a sentence can have two or more clauses also. Now these clauses can be independent or dependent, and accordingly we have simple, compound and complex sentences. So let's understand a clause a little more, because to understand clause, let's understand how we have different parts in that. We've understood that it should have a verb in it, like a word playing the role of a verb. Verb tells us about the existence of somebody or something, so that somebody or something is the subject. Verb tells us about the action of somebody or something, that is whatever that somebody or something performs. And verb also tells us whatever is done to that somebody or something. For instance, I can say, oh, this road is repaired every year. So what is done to that subject road? It is repaired every year. So is repaired is what we call the verb over here. So clause is a group of words including both a subject and a predicate. Globalization has led to the growth of industries across the world. So in this sentence or this clause, because this is only one clause. Why do we say that this is just one clause? It has only one verb, has led. Has led, this is a verb phrase. Two words are there. Has is the helping verb, led is the main verb. So globalization has led to the growth of industries across the world. Just one clause. Subject is globalization. Predicate has led to the growth of industries across the world. We all have studied subject and predicate way back at school. We all did this. So I look forward to hearing from you. So I is the subject. Look forward to hearing from you is the predicate. And the verb in it is look. So what have we understood so far? A group of words that has a verb in it and makes proper sense is a clause. So a sentence can have just one clause also in it. It's a clause that gives us a sentence. And when we talk about a sentence, we say that, oh, it has a subject and a predicate. Subject, we talk about somebody or something, so that becomes the subject. Predicate is whatever is said about that somebody or something. So sentence can have one clause, two or more clauses in it. And accordingly it becomes a simple, compound or complex. That is, those clauses are dependent, independent, what type they are. So Independent means it does not require support. Dependent means it needs support. So one independent clause in a sentence gives us a simple sentence. Why should we know it? Why should we try to understand what we are trying to do now? Because IELTS says that in your writing tasks, your paragraph should have a good mix of simple, compound, and complex sentences. If you have a complex sentence in your writing tasks, like each paragraph, if you include a complex sentence, you definitely get a better band score, even in speaking also. So the latest fashion reminds me of the fashion of 60s. This has just one verb in it, reminds. It's a simple sentence. Now when a sentence has two or more independent clauses, independent, they do not require support. You just connect them, you join them by using coordinating conjunctions or semicolons. They're independent. Fashion is short-lived, one independent clause, an independent. It can be one complete sentence, fashion is short-lived. People fall for fashion can be another complete sentence. So these are two independent clauses. Now we can connect them by using the coordinating conjunction yet. Coordinating conjunctions, I'm sure you all must be familiar with but, and, they're all coordinating conjunctions. So fashion is short-lived, yet people fall for it. So this way we get a compound sentence. So when do we get a compound sentence? When you join two or more independent clauses in a sentence. And how do we join those independent clauses? We use coordinating conjunctions. We'll talk about them a little later. Now let's look at another example. The latest fashion, which is a repeat of the fashion of 60s, will turn out to be ephemeral. So the latest fashion, now which fashion? The latest fashion. Here the word latest describes fashion. Now let's move on. Which is a repeat of the fashion of 60s? This describes this latest fashion. And if you notice it, it has a verb in it, is. And which, we are talking about this, which goes back to the latest fashion, which is a repeat of the fashion of 60s. So it has a verb in it. This group of words has a verb in it. It is a clause, but it does not make that complete sense. It cannot stand on its own. It needs support. On the contrary, if you see the latest fashion will turn out to be ephemeral. Ephemeral is short-lived. So the latest fashion will turn out to be ephemeral. This can stand on its own. So this is the main clause. Which is a repeat of the fashion of 60s is the dependent clause. So we have the main clause and a dependent clause in it. This is a complex sentence. I'm sure you all must be familiar with this type of sentences, but now become a little more conscious of it because IELTS wants you to have this type of sentence structure also in your speaking and writing. So we have this type of sentences with more alertness in whatever we say or whatever we write. So how do you structure a compound sentence? Simple is just one independent clause. Compound sentence, let's understand the compound sentence a little more. So what do? You join independent clauses. I just mentioned the coordinating conjunctions. What are these coordinating conjunctions? We call them fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Now we use them in our sentences. If you do not use a coordinating conjunction to connect your independent clauses in a sentence, you should have a semicolon. Semicolon is like, you can notice a dot and a comma just below that. Unfortunately, many students do not follow this in their writing tasks. They just put one comma, then another comma, and they keep on having many dependent or in many clauses together in a sentence. So that leads to grammatical incorrectness because those sentences cannot be correct. Punctuation errors are there in those. Let's look at the example. Ecological balance is necessary for survival on this planet, and the endangered species should be saved at any cost. So So do you notice a comma has come? And I'm sure some of you must have learned at school, oh, never ever place a comma before and. Like I cannot say red, blue, and orange, and I place a comma before and over there. That's going to be wrong. Oh, but if I have a sentence of this kind, I love red, blue, and orange colors, and I prefer to use them in my paintings, and I love to use them, or I like to use them in my paintings. So second time again, when I put and I have another clause, I must place a comma before this and. Right? So when you use the conjunction and the subjects are different, what should you do? You should place a comma before the conjunction. So that's why. Just look at this example again. Ecological balance is necessary for survival on this planet, comma, and the endangered species should be saved at any cost. In case you do not wish to have the word and, that is, you do not want to have a conjunction there. You want to structure your sentence in a different way. So you can just place a semicolon. And ecological balance is necessary for survival on this planet, then you have a semicolon. The endangered species should be saved at any cost. So just a semicolon, but they are independent clauses. One does not depend on another. You can have two separate sentences also. So independent clause gives you a separate sentence. But yes, you can also join two of them using a fan voice conjunction. On the previous slide, we had the example using yet. So we all are familiar with these and, but almost every day in whatever we say, we use these words. So these are compound sentences. Now let's move on to talk about complex. That's what we'll. So complex sentence should have a dependent clause. Dependent clause, that means a group of words, that's a clause. It can play the role of a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. So noun is like it answers the question what, who, where. So if I say something is painful, is a painful truth of our society. So what is a painful truth of our society? What is a painful truth? Something is. So that something should be a noun. So that illiterates are governed by, that literates are governed by illiterates is a painful truth of our society. So that literates are governed by illiterates is a painful truth of our society. So what's a noun clause in this? That literates are governed by illiterates is a painful truth of our society. Talks about it. So the first clause is the noun clause. We can restructure the sentence. It is a painful truth of our society that literates are governed by illiterates. The moment you put it that way, now you understood how we can have this kind of structure. If we start something like this, it is a painful truth of our society. Let me give you another example. It is a matter of concern that many students are unable to understand what a complex sentence is. I can restructure it that many students are not able to understand again what a complex structure is or what a complex sentence is a matter of concern. Now this has got two dependent clauses, the example that I gave. It is a matter of concern that many students are not able to understand, what. Again we have another dependent clause, what a complex sentence is. Let's look at another examples. Some believe that technology will soon make the teachers redundant. So some believe what? This answers the question what? Nobody knows what? Nobody knows where he is. Now what used to be a dream earlier has now become a reality. So what has become a reality now? what used to be a dream earlier. A very simple example for this, like children's park has been uh, changed into a hotel, or has been uh, changed into a parking space. So children's park. Now I can modify it a little bit. Suppose in my writing I have a sentence of this type and I want to include a clause over there to make it a complex sentence. I want to include a dependent clause. How can I do it? What used to be a children's park earlier has now become a hotel. So what do I have now? I have a complex sentence. So you can always make changes even while reviewing your writing tasks. Of course, speaking, this can happen with practice, a lot of practice, so that you slowly you start including complex sentence structures here and there. Writing, we need to be more careful. How do we have an adjective clause? Let's look at this. Adjective means adjective modifies somebody or something. So somebody or something. So the Ebola virus. Now, which virus? Which could have been controlled in its incipient stage has now become pandemic. So, which could have been controlled in its incipient stage is the dependent clause that describes Ebola virus. If I now let me give you another example. The government policy. Which policy? The government policy that favors the startups has been appreciated by one and all. So here we are describing the policy. Now those children, which children who are street smart are able to handle peer pressure. My friend who is a fashion designer has a good sense of humor. Sometimes we have to talk about our friends in speaking. So my friend who has a good sense of humor is a fashion designer, or my friend who is whatever way you wish to say. My friend who is a fashion designer has good sense of humor. So these are adjective clauses. So when you include an adjective clause, then also you have a complex sentence. Dependent clause. Uh, Afterwards, then there is no comma in between. So if the dependent clause comes at the beginning, then you have a comma after it. If it comes later on, then you do not have a comma in between. So that difference is there. Children would become more confident. Again, you have the dependent clause afterwards. Children would become more confident if they got more exposure to the world. Do you notice a difference in the structure? If we engage in more skill-based training programs, we can reduce unemployment. What do you have over here? You have a present simple tense. So you can use we can, we will, we may. But if the if clause has the conditional, we also call it the conditional, if it has a past perfect had been handled. Like if you had told me earlier, I would have helped you. So if it has a past perfect, then what does it have? It has a would, the main clause has would plus have plus a past participle. So unemployment would not have become such a big problem if it had been handled at its nascent stage. Now let's look at another structure. What do we have in the if clause over here? Simple past tense. If they got more exposure to the world. So children would become more confident if they got more exposure to the world. So remember, if you place this at the beginning, then you place a comma after it. If it is the second clause, then there is no comma in between. Let's look at another one. Unless you make a mistake, you will not learn. You cannot learn. You may not learn. Any way it can come. So unless you make a mistake. Right? And I will not go from here unless you return my pen or my book. You must have heard this kind of sentences. I will not sign this contract unless you make the required changes. So if you have that first, then a comma is put after it. Although I love shopping, comma, I did not accompany my friends to the mall. So when you have this dependent clause at the beginning, you place a comma after it. So these are some examples of adverb clauses. So what have we understood? When you have a noun clause, an adjective clause, or an adverb clause in a sentence, then it becomes a complex sentence. That's how we have a complex sentence. Let's look at these. Punctuation is important. Let's practice that. While my father loves spicy food, my mother hates it. So here we should have a comma after food. Although Nick runs very slowly, he is an excellent defender in soccer. We must have a comma after slowly. Patrick gets excellent grades, although he never studies. No comma is needed over here. Right? If you have the dependent clause later on, no comma is needed. Sonia will go abroad if she gets leave. No comma needed again. If the government had taken proper measures, so you have the dependent clause first, there should be a comma after it. If the government had taken proper measures earlier, comma, the situation wouldn't have become so bad. So punctuation in complex sentences, if you have the dependent clause first, you place a comma after the dependent clause. If it comes later on, you do not separate it by putting a comma. This word that is also so important. So insert that at the correct place in the following. It is widely believed that, so we have the word that. It is widely believed that shopping is good for the national economy. It is my belief that people shop when they are bored. A lot of people think that, right? We usually have these sentences and we omit the word that. And in writing, we need to be very careful. So a lot of people think that supermarket prices are too high. These are common misconception. Doesn't make correct sense. We require the word that over here. So there's a common misconception that food should not be eaten after best before date. It seems to me, having a right choice, no, it seems to me that. So do you notice these are separate clauses in a sentence? So it seems to me is a separate clause. Having a wide choice of products is unnecessary is a different clause, and we join them using the word that. Children should be taught to recognize adverts are designed. Children should be taught to recognize that adverts are designed to persuade them. So when we have these clauses that are connected to the main clause using the word that, then also we have a complex sentence. So we have many such sentences, and usually we go wrong with the way it is structured. He told me that. The tense is important over here. He told me what? He told me that, suppose in speaking, we are talking about maybe a friend who helped us, or somebody who advised us, or we had a conversation with someone about something, maybe about money. So he told me that it was important for me to save money. So I cannot say it is important. He told me that. It's all past. He suggested that. He suggested what? He suggested that I should take this medicine regularly, or I need to do something. I thought that I would clear that exam, but I didn't. I thought that I would meet my friend at the end of the day, but I could not. I felt that. So sometimes you have to talk about your feelings. It's included in part two questions in speaking. So I felt that I I felt that he would return my book after some time, or I felt that I would be more careful in future. So he said that again, it has to be in the past tense. He said that he had to finish his work, or he said that he had to start a new project. So we should be careful with the tense also in our these dependent clauses. So we have sentences where we have independent clauses and dependent clauses. If there is just one independent clause, that is a simple sentence. When you join two independent clauses using coordinating conjunctions, it gives you a compound sentence. And if you have a dependent clause, then that gives you a complex sentence.